I was floating in my own pool on my own property when three kids I didn't know jumped in beside me. Their mother, standing at the fence, smirking, claiming my pool belonged to the neighborhood and that she could ban me from using it. When I refused, she called the cops and slapped me across the face in front of half the block. That was her mistake, because she thought I'd stay silent. Instead, I took her to court. It was a kind of neighborhood people dream about, where trees arched over quiet streets like nature's own cathedral, and the silence was broken only by birdsong or the occasional bark of a friendly golden retriever. When I moved in 2 years ago, I felt like I'd finally landed somewhere I could breathe. No more city sirens. No honking traffic outside my window at 2 a.m., just a gentle hum of suburban peace. Or so I thought. What sealed the deal when I bought the house wasn't just a low crime rate or the neatly trimmed hedges lining each lawn. It was the pool, a shimmering, in-ground oasis tucked neatly in the backyard, bordered by a sturdy privacy fence. The previous owners, an older couple with grown kids, had built it with full HOA approval. They even showed me the paperwork during the final walkthrough, emphasizing it was legally approved as part of the private property. Just keep the fence maintained, they said. It'll keep the nosy ones out. At the time, I thought they were just being funny. Retired people tend to exaggerate when they're handing over something they love. But soon, I'd learned that the fence wasn't just for aesthetics or insurance. It was a warning. For those first few months, it was paradise. I'd spent years grinding in a cubicle, watching life slip past from behind glass and spreadsheets. So to finally own something, this house, this space, this water, I treated every cannonball like a celebration. I'd float under the open sky, thinking about how far I'd come. The pool was more than water and concrete. It was a symbol, a reward. But in every peaceful story, there's always a shadow that creeps in. Her name was Karen. She lived next door in a modest 2-story with pink curtains that fluttered like flags of quiet menace. I noticed her the day I moved in. She wasn't there to welcome me, just standing at the edge of her property, arms folded, eyes scanning everything I did like a human surveillance drone. I waved. She didn't wave back, just turned, disappeared behind her door. That was the first red flag. I tried to brush it off. Maybe she was shy, or maybe her cat had just died. People have bad days. But over the weeks, her behavior got stranger. She was always outside. Always. On sunny days, she walked the perimeter of her yard as if patrolling a fortress. On cloudy days, she stood on her porch staring across lawns like a general surveying enemy territory. And on rainy days, she stood under a giant floral umbrella with binoculars. I'm not kidding. One time, I caught her peeking over my fence, literally tiptoeing to peer into my backyard. When our eyes met, she didn't even flinch, just smiled like we were sharing a private joke. I didn't laugh. I tried not to read too much into it. Neighborhoods had their quirks. Maybe this was hers. But things got worse when I noticed her 3 kids. The first time I saw them, they were tearing through front lawns like miniature hurricanes. Screaming, laughing, kicking balls into gardens. No adult supervision. Not even a glance from Karen, who stood sipping iced tea on her porch like she was watching birds. I remember the moment clearly. The youngest, a little girl no older than 6, darted into the street after a runaway soccer ball. A car came to a screeching halt, horn blaring. My heart stopped. The driver jumped out, frantic. Karen didn't move, didn't shout. Didn't run. She just stood there, arms still folded, watching. That moment should have scared her. Should have made her pull her kids inside, tighten the reins. But no, it only emboldened her. They became a constant presence, appearing out of nowhere, cutting through my yard as a shortcut, tapping on windows for fun. I told myself to be patient. These were kids. They didn't know better. But Karen did, and she did nothing. The tension wasn't just in my backyard. It lived in my chest now. Every time I came home from work, I'd check the pool. I'd find candy wrappers near the gate, toy water guns left on the grass. Once, I even found a pair of tiny flip-flops just inside the fence. I started locking the gate religiously, even added a padlock. The final straw came when I caught one of the kids try to climb over the fence with a towel around his neck, like a cape. I stopped him just in time, and he ran off without a word. I stood there for minutes, staring at the trail of footprints on my pool deck. My sanctuary wasn't mine anymore. It was being invaded. I needed to say something, not to the kids, but to Karen. Surely if I explained calmly, she'd understand. So one afternoon, I walked next door and knocked. She opened the door, chewing gum like she was auditioning for a villain role in a sitcom. "Yes?" she asked, not even pretending to smile. "Hi, Karen. Sorry to bother you," I said, staying polite. "I just wanted to talk about the pool." She blinked. "What about it?" "Your kids have been sneaking into my yard. I think they're using it when I'm not home. Look, it's a liability issue. I really need them to stop. The pool is private, and Before I could finish, she raised a hand. "Wait, that's not your pool." I paused, confused. "I'm sorry. It's part of the neighborhood. Community property. It's not just yours. It was built with HOA approval, right?" "Yes, but on my property." She smirked. "We'll see about that." That was the moment I realized this wasn't ignorance. This was entitlement. Karen knew it was mine, but in her world, rules bent to her convenience. From that day on, everything changed. She let her kids linger by the fence, let them throw toys into my yard, and act surprised when I returned them. I'd find them pressed against the mesh, staring like they were waiting for the gates of Disneyland to open. And Karen? She just watched, arms folded, smiling. What she didn't know was that I kept every email, every HOA approval letter, every legal paper tied to that pool. And when the time came, I'd use every last one. Because while Karen thought she was dealing with a passive neighbor, she was about to find out just how wrong she was. The next weekend arrived like any other, sunny, warm, and full of promise. I decided to take the day off. No emails, no errands, no interruptions. I was going to live in that pool. With a fresh towel in hand and an ice-cold lemonade on the table beside me, I stepped out into the backyard, finally ready to reclaim my space. I slipped into shallow end and let the water embrace me like it always had. For the first time in weeks, I felt the weight of Karen and her chaos melt off my shoulders. The ripples shimmered in the sunlight. All was calm. Then came the scream. It pierced the air like a siren, high-pitched, sudden, and much too close. I turned just in time to see 3 tiny bodies leap into the pool beside me. Water exploded everywhere. My lemonade toppled. My piece shattered. Karen's kids. They didn't just sneak in. They stormed in, laughing and splashing as if I didn't exist. One did a cannonball dangerously close to my face. Another sent waves crashing over the pool deck with an inflatable whale. The youngest slipped briefly and grabbed my shoulder for support like I was a lifeguard on duty. I was stunned. They hadn't come through the gate. No way. That was still locked. I glanced around in disbelief until I saw it. A trail of beach towels and pool toys stretched from the side of the fence, straight through a hole beneath the bottom panel. A gap no adult could use. But 3 wiry kids? No problem. They'd wriggled underneath like raccoons. I climbed out of the pool, heart pounding, not from fear, but rage. I stormed over the gate and found Karen standing there with a smirk, arms crossed, leaning casually like she was enjoying a show. "Hey, Opie," she called. "Enjoying the sunshine?" My patience had a limit, and Karen had sprinted past it. "Karen, your kids just broke into my pool. Again. You need to get them out of here now." She arched an eyebrow. "Broken? Don't be so dramatic. They're just kids. And it's hot. Let them enjoy it. You're not even using the whole pool, are you?" That stopped me cold. I stared at her like she'd just tried to sell me my own shoes. "I don't care if I'm using 1 square foot of it," I said. "It's my property. Your kids are trespassing." She waved a dismissive hand. "Relax. You're always so uptight. This is supposed to be a community. You're not above sharing." Something in her tone shifted. Low, controlled, smug. "You know, as a member of the HOA board," she added, "I could technically argue that the pool is community property. There it was. The play. She wasn't asking. She was threatening. I have the paperwork. I said, the pool was approved with HOA consent on private land. I'll send you a copy. Her smile faded, but only slightly. Well, if you want to be that way, she huffed. You're making things harder than they have to be. My kids are good kids. They could have drowned. That made her flinch. A tiny twitch, quickly masked. You know what? She said, suddenly flipping tones like a villain changing masks. If you keep talking to my kids like that, I'll report you to the board, maybe even ban you from the pool. My jaw dropped. You're threatening to ban me from my own pool? She smiled wider now. Yep, and guess what? You just got yourself banned. Then she turned and walked off like a queen retreating from a battlefield. Completely convinced she'd won. I didn't follow her. I didn't yell. I just turned back to the chaos in the water. Karen's kids were still splashing, laughing, soaking the patio furniture I meticulously arranged that morning. So I did the only thing that came to mind. I gathered every towel, every inflatable toy, every beach ball, and walked calmly to the gate. I called out to the kids, if you want your stuff, follow me. They grumbled, but it worked. They scrambled out, shivering, confused, wet footprints trailing behind. When I reached Karen's driveway, she was on the phone, laughing. Her tone was fake sweet, too sweet. I handed the toys over without a word, locked the gate behind me, and marched back into the house. I didn't even make it to the kitchen before I heard it. Sirens. My heart dropped. A cruiser pulled up in front of my house, lights flashing like a crime scene. Karen met them before I could even open my door. Her voice carried across the yard, loud and theatrical. Yes, officer, that one, she said, pointing straight at me. He harassed my children, pushed them, threatened me. I blinked. Excuse me. 2 officers stepped between us. Sir, let's talk over here, one said. Ma'am, we'll take both your statements. Karen was already mid-rant. He screamed at my kids. Then he physically removed them. He threw their things. I stood frozen, stunned at how confidently she lied. The officer turned to me. Can you tell me what happened? So I did. Calm, measured. I explained how the kids broke in, how Karen justified it, how I escorted the children back safely. I even mentioned the previous incidents. When I said the words private pool, I saw their eyes shift. I had their attention. That's when Karen snapped. You lying idiot, she shrieked. You assaulted me, and now you're lying to the cops. And then, before anyone could move, she slapped me, hard, right across the face. Gasps erupted, not from the officers, from the crowd, neighbors. I hadn't even noticed them gathering, but there they were, 6 people watching from across the street, phones out, jaws dropped. The officer didn't hesitate. He grabbed Karen by the arm, spun her around, and slapped cuffs on her wrists as she screamed at the top of her lungs. Her kids started crying. I touched my cheek, stunned, not at the pain, but at the audacity. A moment ago, I was a criminal. Now, she was being dragged into a police cruiser while the whole neighborhood watched. The cruiser had barely turned the corner before the whisper started. Karen's screams echoed down the street, like some banshee had been exorcised from the neighborhood. Her kids stood frozen on her porch, soaked, confused, crying. The rest of the street, watching, recording, whispering. Me? I just stood there, one hand still resting on my cheek where she'd slapped me. I wasn't hurt. Not really. But the shock hadn't worn off yet. The whole thing had exploded so fast it didn't feel real. That was the moment I saw him. Bill, the HOA president. He was making his way across the lawn, weaving through stunned onlookers like a man walking into a war zone. He looked annoyed, not surprised, not confused, just tired, like he'd seen this kind of thing before. Opie, he said, arriving beside me. You all right? I nodded slowly. I think so. He looked toward the departing cruiser, then back to me. Let me guess. Karen again? I blinked. You know about her? He sighed like a man who had too many emails and not enough coffee. Come inside, I said. You'll want to hear this. We sat at my kitchen table, wet footprints still dry on the patio outside. I told Bill everything, from the moment Karen's kids first trespassed to her lying about being on the HOA board, about the threats, about today, every detail. Bill listened quietly. When I was done, he sat back, rubbed his face, and gave a bitter laugh. I should have seen this coming, he muttered. I raised an eyebrow. What do you mean? This isn't the first time she's done something like this, he said. The previous owners, the ones who sold you the house, they had a similar issue with her. It didn't get physical, but she tried to claim the pool was public back then, too. Said the fence was anti-community. I warned her then, but I didn't press hard. Thought she'd back off. He looked at me seriously. I'm sorry, Opie. I gave her the benefit of the doubt too many times. That was a mistake. I leaned forward. Wait. She's not actually on the HOA board, is she? Bill shook his head. Not even close. We never gave her a seat. She applied twice and got rejected both times. The woman doesn't understand boundaries, and clearly not the law. I felt something inside me click. Resolve. Well, I said, she crossed the line today. I'm pressing charges. That night, after the adrenaline faded and the silence returned, I called my lawyer. It wasn't just about the slap or the trespassing. It was about what came before, what came after, and what could have happened if things went even slightly differently. Kids, water, lies, assault. We had to make this official. My lawyer was efficient and sharp. She instructed me to gather all documentation related to my home and the pool, anything showing property lines, HOA approvals, neighbor correspondences. I didn't have to dig far. I kept everything. Within a few hours, I had a full digital binder, neatly organized and ready for court. A storm of paper ready to rain down on Karen, like legal hailstones. But I wasn't the only one collecting evidence. That evening, just as the sun dipped low and turned the sky gold, there was a knock at my door. It was Claire and James, a couple from 2 houses down. They weren't close friends. We exchanged maybe a dozen hellos in 2 years. But today, Claire held up her phone with wide eyes. You need to see this. It was video. Karen screaming at me. Karen shoving me. Karen slapping me. And all of it, on camera, time-stamped, clear as crystal. James held up his own phone. We got it from 2 angles. I can email them to you. Also, you're not the only one she's harassed. He shared stories. Little ones, big ones. Karen trimming someone's bushes without asking. Yelling at another neighbor's teenage daughter for dressing too provocatively. Letting her kids ride bikes across freshly reseeded lawns. The pattern was unmistakable. For years, she'd bullied, harassed, and lied her way through the neighborhood. I think everyone just hoped she'd get bored and stop, Claire said. But you actually did something. I nodded slowly. They weren't just neighbors anymore. They were witnesses. In the days that followed, things settled, but not in the way they had before. There was a strange new stillness to the street. Karen's house was silent. No kids running. No shouting. No surveillance from behind curtains. She was gone. Out on bail maybe, but not visible. Still, her absence didn't make me let my guard down. I kept documenting. I had my lawyer contact the police to ensure the investigation was moving. And the more people learned what happened, the more they came forward. One neighbor, an older woman named Rita, showed me a photo of her garden, ruined by Karen's kids last spring. Another man, George, revealed a complaint he filed months ago after Karen accused him of poisoning her cat. The cat was later found sleeping in his garage. The house next to hers? They'd moved out last year. Now I knew why. The morning before the trial began, I got a call from my lawyer. She's changed her story, she said flatly. I blinked. Karen? Yes. Now she's claiming it was all a misunderstanding, that she was confused about the property lines, and that you attacked her first. I felt my blood boil. We have video. We have witnesses. She slapped me in front of a cop. I know, my lawyer said. That's why she's panicking. This is classic damage control. She's trying to muddy the waters. I stared out the window, toward the pool. My pool. The one she tried to claim. The one her kids invaded. The one I was nearly banned from using. Let her try, I said. She picked the wrong neighbor this time. I stood by the window that morning, watching the steam swirl from my coffee. Beyond the fence, my pool glittered under a pale sunrise. The world looked calm, as if nothing had ever gone wrong. But inside me, things were very different. Today was the first official step toward holding Karen accountable. The paperwork had been filed, the police report submitted, witnesses ready, video evidence compiled. And my lawyer? She was sharper than barbed wire. Karen could twist the truth all she wanted. She wasn't ready for what was coming. But fate wasn't done twisting just yet. I was still in my pajamas when I heard a knock. Not a friendly one. A deliberate, heavy-handed rap that echoed through the walls like a drumbeat of dread. I opened the door to two uniformed officers. The same ones from that chaotic day. Their faces were calm, but their body language told a different story. Tense, alert, prepared for anything. Sir, the lead officer said, we received another call from Ms. Karen Daniels this morning. She's made new claims that require clarification. I blinked. What claims? She says you've been harassing her, approaching her home, intimidating her children, that you've made threats since the last incident. I nearly laughed. I haven't spoken to her since she was arrested, I said. She's the one who slapped me in front of you guys. You saw it. The second officer nodded. That's why we're here in person, not with a warrant. Honestly, we don't believe her. But procedure is procedure. Come in, I said. I have cameras. You can see for yourself. I led them into the living room and pulled up the security footage from the last few days. Multiple angles. No visits to Karen's home. No trespassing. No shouting matches. Nothing but me working on my laptop, doing yard work, or floating in my pool like a man, trying to remember what peace felt like. The officers reviewed it, expressionless. Then they exchanged a look. Thank you, the lead said. This aligns with our suspicions. She's trying to get ahead of something. Like the trial? I asked. Exactly. They stood to leave, but I had to ask, why does she think she can keep getting away with this? The second officer looked at me. Because until now, no one's ever stopped her. As if summoned by prophecy, Bill, the HOA president, showed up an hour later. He had a stack of folders under his arm and a face like a man ready to declare war. She's panicking, he said as soon as I opened the door. I got a call from her this morning. She threatened you too? I asked. Worse. She claimed you assaulted her again and that she's filing a complaint with the HOA to revoke your community privileges. I blinked. Community privileges? This is my property. He laughed. Exactly, which is why I came prepared. He dropped the folders on my table with a satisfying thud. These are the original HOA blueprints, board meeting minutes from the last 5 years, and all prior complaints ever filed against Karen. I've had enough of her circus. He opened one of the folders, revealing a map that clearly marked my lot lines. The pool? Smack in the middle of my backyard. Completely private. She's been banking on confusion, Bill said, but now there's no room for it. Later that afternoon, Bill called for an emergency HOA meeting, an open one, in the neighborhood park. Karen didn't show, probably on the advice of her lawyer, but the rest of the block came, hungry for answers. Bill didn't mince words. Let's talk about the truth, he began, standing in front of the gazebo like a mayor addressing a town on the brink. There have been rumors, lies, and a lot of disruption lately, and I want it on record, publicly and officially, that Opie's pool is private property, fully approved by the HOA in 2016. No shared access. No community claim. He held up the blueprint like a badge of honor. What's more, Ms. Karen Daniels has never been a member of this board. Any claims she made to that effect were false and unauthorized. A ripple of gasps and mutters moved through the crowd. Bill wasn't done. I've also submitted documentation to the board for permanent action to bar Ms. Daniels from serving in any official HOA capacity in the future. Her behavior has not only violated community standards, it's endangered neighbors and children alike. He paused. And just so we're all clear, her actions are now part of an active legal case, which I fully support. As your president, I stand with OP. After that speech, everything changed. People who had once avoided the topic now came up to me with handshakes, apologies, and support. I should have said something sooner, Rita said, handing me a fresh pie. She yelled at my grandson last Halloween for being too loud. He was 4. Another neighbor offered to help testify if needed. One brought over old security footage from last summer, showing Karen dragging lawn chairs across my side yard during a barbecue and muttering under her breath. It was like a dam had broken. Years of silent frustration came rushing out, and now that someone, finally, had stood up to her, everyone was ready to help. Karen had always counted on silence, but the neighborhood had found its voice, and it was louder than she could ever scream. When Bill wrapped up his speech that day at the park, the energy shifted. You could feel it in the air. Something unspoken had snapped loose, and the silence that had protected Karen for years was gone. Now, she was on the defensive, and the community, we were sharpening the truth like a sword. That night, I received an unexpected call from a private number. "Hello." I answered cautiously. A pause. Then, "You've made a mistake." It was her. Karen. Her voice was cold, mechanical, like she was reciting a script someone had written for her in a rush. "You've turned the entire neighborhood against me," she said. "Do you think you'll win by embarrassing me? By lying to the police?" I didn't lie. I replied evenly, "And you assaulted me in front of half the block." "You pushed me," she snapped, her voice rising. "You made me look crazy." I didn't respond. Let her rant. "They're going to regret this," she finished. "All of them." Then she hung up. I stared at the silent phone, then pressed the screen and saved the audio. My lawyer would want to hear that. The following week became a masterclass in preparation. My lawyer had turned my living room into a war room. Laptop open, files spread across the table, and a whiteboard covered in arrows, names, and dates. She moved like a strategist before a siege. "We've got physical evidence," she said. "Security footage, HOA maps, signed statement from neighbors. The assault charges alone are open and shut. What's she arguing now?" I asked that she was confused about the property line, that you provoked her, that the community misunderstood her intentions. And she hesitated. "What?" "She's trying to get character witnesses." I raised an eyebrow. "Who would vouch for her?" My lawyer chuckled. "So far, no one. She tried a neighbor 3 doors down, but they sent us a copy of her email with a very different version of events than what she told the police. The walls around Karen were collapsing, and she was trying to dig her way out with a spoon. "Get ready," my lawyer said. "This is going to be fast." The next day, I was called down to the police station to clarify a few details. As I sat across from the same officers who responded to the slap heard round the block, I noticed their expressions had softened since that day. Not with pity, with clarity. Karen's made 6 different statements. One officer said, "Each one contradicts the others." First, she said you slapped her. Then she said she tripped. Then she said you yelled at her. "We've reviewed your security footage and the witness videos. There's no sign of aggression from your side." The second officer tapped a report with a pen. "And the neighborhood has been vocal." I nodded. "That's putting it lightly." "We're moving forward with the assault and trespassing charges," he confirmed. "Your testimony and video evidence make this a strong case. And, to be honest, she's digging herself in deeper with every complaint. What Karen never expected, what no one could have expected, was how united the neighborhood had become. People I barely knew were now knocking on my door, dropping off flash drives of footage, handwritten notes detailing past interactions, and screenshots of text messages Karen had sent them try to recruit them into her fantasy version of events. One text read, "You know how rude Opie is. You saw how he was with my kids. The pool was built by HOA money. He just refuses to let us enjoy it." Another, "I need someone to say they heard him yelling that day. Just to back up my version. You don't have to go to court. Just sign a statement." The recipient had simply replied, "No, These neighbors weren't just defending me. They were protecting each other. Years of passive suffering finally boiling over into action. Karen had ruled through manipulation and pressure. But when she tried to pit the neighborhood against me, she underestimated one thing. We were all tired of her, and she was about to find out what it felt like to be on the outside of a community. 2 days before the trial, I sat on my back porch, legs in the pool, watching the water ripple with the breeze. It felt strange, like standing on the edge of something. A cliff before the fall, or maybe before the flight. Bill stopped by with a beer in hand. "You ready?" he asked. "As ready as I'll ever be." He took a sip, then set the bottle down on the table. "I talked to the board. After the trial, we're proposing a formal censure. Lifetime ban from the HOA board and possible eviction motion for ongoing misconduct. It'll go on her record. We're not letting her pull this again." I looked at him. "Do you think she understands what's coming?" Bill didn't smile. "No, and that's why it's going to hit harder." He stood to leave, clapped my shoulder. "We've got your back." The night before the trial, just after 9 p.m., there was a knock at the door. Not loud, not angry, just soft. I opened it, half expecting another neighbor. It was Karen's oldest son. He looked no older than 12, skinny, holding a soggy towel in one hand and a water gun in the other. Behind him, their porch light glowed dimly. "Hi," he mumbled. Can I say sorry? For my mom." I didn't speak for a moment. He looked up at me, eyes not defiant, not scared, just tired, like a kid who'd seen too much chaos for too long. "I didn't mean to break your stuff," he said. We thought it was a park or something." I knelt down. "It's okay," I said. "You're not in trouble. But you can't come in my yard anymore. Not without permission." He nodded, and I handed him his water gun from the bucket I'd left near the fence. "Tell your mom we'll see her in court," I said gently. And then I watched him disappear into the shadows, wondering if maybe, just maybe, that kid would grow up to be nothing like her. The courtroom wasn't what I expected. No soaring ceilings or dramatic lighting. No hushed gasps as I walked in. Just beige walls, low murmurs, and the sound of papers shuffling like a heartbeat. But make no mistake, this room would decide everything. Karen sat at the opposite table, expression blank but eyes burning. She wore a gray suit and a look of thin, manufactured innocence. Her lawyer whispered something to her, but she didn't nod. She was locked on me, like she still believed she could win by sheer stubbornness. I glanced at my lawyer, who gave me a confident nod. Then at Bill, seated 2 rows behind me, folders in his lap, ready to testify if needed. A few neighbors sat further back, Claire, James, Rita, and others, all quiet, solemn, present. The judge entered. We stood, and just like that, the trial began. The prosecution wasted no time. First, they submitted the neighborhood security footage. The slap, the shove, the verbal abuse. The room fell silent as the video played. Karen's voice echoed across the speakers, filled with venom, her hand cracking across my face for all to see. She shifted uncomfortably, her lawyer avoiding eye contact with the screen. Then came the documentation. My pool permit, the HOA property maps, Bill's written statement. A clear, irrefutable trail proving one thing. Karen knew the pool was mine, and she didn't care. My lawyer brought up screenshots of Karen's text to other neighbors, asking them to falsify statements. Gasps this time. Real ones. One juror looked directly at her and shook his head. The judge turned to Karen's lawyer. "Would you like to respond?" Karen's lawyer stood, visibly sweating, and mumbled about misunderstandings, emotional distress, and lack of clarity. But it was flimsy, paper-thin. And then Karen took the stand. She started strong, or tried to. Calm voice, practiced answers. "I was simply trying to ensure community access to what I believe was a shared resource," she said. "But you told the police you were on the HOA board. You are not." "Correct." A pause. "I may have misspoken." "Twice." "Yes." "And you slapped the plaintiff?" I was defending myself. "Even though the plaintiff never touched you, raised a hand, or even approached you aggressively, I felt threatened." Her voice cracked. The facade slipped. Under cross-examination, the pressure mounted. Her contradictions piled up like a house of cards in a hurricane. Every answer opened a door to another lie. By the time she stepped down, she was visibly unraveling. Voice shaky, hands fidgeting, cheeks flushed. It was over, and everyone in that room knew it. The jury didn't even take a full day. Less than 3 hours later, we were called back in. I didn't realize I was holding my breath until the bailiff said, "All rise." The foreperson stood. We, the jury, find the defendant guilty on all counts: trespassing, assault, and falsify a report. Karen's jaw dropped. She muttered something under her breath, but her lawyer placed a hand on her shoulder and shook his head. The judge banged the gavel. "Ms. Daniels, you are hereby fined for damages, sentenced to probation, and required to attend anger management. Any further violation of the law or HOA code will result in escalated penalties, including potential eviction proceedings." He looked at me. "Mr. Opie, thank you for your restraint and your documentation. You are hereby awarded full restitution and the right to petition the HOA for further protections." Karen didn't look at me as she was escorted out, but I looked at her and saw not anger, but something worse: emptiness. A week later, the HOA held a special session. Bill stood at the front once again. In light of recent events, this board votes unanimously to permanently bar Karen Daniels from holding any role within the HOA. Furthermore, we are issuing a formal complaint to the County Housing Authority regarding her conduct. Applause from the entire neighborhood. Later that evening, Claire stopped by with cookies. James fixed the latch on my fence. Rita brought over clippings from her garden. The energy was different now, light, grateful, connected. We weren't just neighbors anymore. We were survivors of chaos, and we had reclaimed our peace. It was a month before I saw Karen's house up for sale. No announcement, no flyers, just a discreet sign on the lawn, like she was trying to disappear without being noticed. Her kids didn't play outside anymore. She didn't peer over fences. No one saw her walk the perimeter with arms folded like a general on patrol. And then one morning, a moving truck arrived. No neighbors came to say goodbye. No waves, no farewells. Just the quiet of a neighborhood finally healing. I sat by the pool that afternoon, feet dangling in the water, drink in hand. I thought about everything that had happened. The lies, the threats, the assault, the community that came together, the justice that finally held the line. The fence was still there, but now it wasn't just wood and metal. It was a symbol, a reminder that when you stand up for what's right, even against someone loud, manipulative, and deeply entitled, you can win. Because fences don't just keep bad things out. Sometimes they hold the good things in, like peace, like community, like justice.